a minute. By my calculation, I don't think I've done a video since March of 2021. It's now September of 2022, and I'm going to do something simple today because my daughters, who are the reason why I have this cooking channel, have asked for it. They want me to make the classic Spanish tortilla de patatas, potato tortilla. It's a simple dish. It's not hard to master. There's a few tricks along the way, which I will endeavor to show you. It has very few ingredients, and now my videographer Sarai, the lovely Sarai, will show you what I'm talking about. Look, of course it's potatoes, it's eggs, some good quality fresh eggs, you know, some of those heirloom fresh eggs if you can afford it, are definitely recommended. The ones that have a yellow yolk, a yolk that's a deep yellow as opposed to a pale yellow, those are good eggs. Onions, sweet onions if you can get them, yellow onions if you can't, and olive oil and salt. Those are all of the ingredients to this tortilla. Now you can add some other things. Classically, this is the recipe, the original recipe. So we're going to start by peeling the potatoes. Now you would think that that's a pretty simple task, and it is. I have one little trick though. When I put the potatoes to soak in water after I peel them, I add a little bit of salt to the water, just to try to get a little flavor into the potatoes. So before we peel the potato, let me talk about the ratio of potatoes to eggs, because that's really the most important part of the ingredients for this tortilla. You're going to develop a feel for it if you make this tortilla more than once, but I can tell you in general, if you have one large potato or two smallish to medium-sized potatoes, you're going to have one egg for that. That's my ratio because I like a very rich tortilla. In Spain, I've been shocked at how few eggs they use in their tortilla. When we make this tortilla, I always start with the onions. I start by caramelizing the onions in a separate pan. In some recipes, they'll actually have you cook the onions in the same oil that one uses to poach the potatoes. I prefer to pre-cook the onions in a little bit of butter. It's not standard recipe ingredient, the butter, but I like the way it makes the onions taste. So I'll pre-cook the onions, get them to exactly the right degree of crunchiness with a little bit of sweetness, and I set those aside and let them cool while I prepare the potatoes. This is a lot of onion, I think, for the size tortilla I'm going to make. But if I have more, then I'll just save it and I'll use it in something else. They're not going to be diced, they're going to be sliced. Instead of being diced from along the equator, let's say, they're going to be sliced from North Pole to South Pole, so that you cut it in half from North Pole to South Pole, and then you slice off this little end here. We don't use that for anything. And then we start cutting straight down. Look. Okay. All right, so we're ready to go to caramelize the onions. Look, about a tablespoon, I'm going to say, of butter. And about a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. The deal with tortillas de patatas, if you ask the purist, is that the onion and the potato should never be brown. There should be no brown involved. So you should cook the onions so that they're perfectly caramelized in the sense that they are mostly soft. They're tender. That's the word I'm looking for. That they are tender and that they're sweet because the caramelization is taking place, but they should not be brown. And it's the same with the potatoes. The potatoes should be perfectly poached and tender all the way through, but they shouldn't be crisp or they should not be brown. That's not how a tortilla is supposed to look. Time to start peeling the potato. Absolutely the most tedious part of the whole process. If you're lucky, you'll have someone to help you, like I do today. Sarai, my good friend and assistant, who has volunteered to peel these potatoes while I do other things.
And to eat the tortilla.
And to eat the tortilla. She just asked me a very good question, which is what kind of potatoes? Well, the bottom line is whichever ones you happen to have. You know, like you can make tortilla española, tortilla de patatas from almost any kind of potato as long as it's not a crumbly potato. So you can make it with russets, you can make it with Idaho russets. I like to make it with these, with the yellow potatoes, okay, because they hold up well when you poach them in the olive oil, but they're still tender and they're very soft. I'm going to add a little salt to the cooking onions, just a little bit to help counterbalance the sulfuric acid that's natural in onions and to help them caramelize. I just tried this. It's tender and delicious and sweetly caramelized, so it's ready to go off to the side to cool while we poach the potatoes in olive oil. While we slice up the potatoes, we're going to start getting the oil hot, the oil in which to cook the potatoes. Now, we're not frying the potatoes per se. We're not trying to get a crispy exterior and a tender interior. We're actually poaching the potatoes, the sliced potatoes, in olive oil. And I use extra virgin olive oil. It would be nice if it were Spanish olive oil, but I'm pretty sure it's Italian. The point is that you don't have to use a whole half bottle of olive oil every time you make a new one, every time you make a tortilla. When you're done making the tortilla, you strain the olive oil back into the bottle when it cools, and you use it the following time. And you can do this 2 or 3 times, and you should, because there's no reason why the oil is not going to turn bad from using it 2 or 3 times over the course of a week or so. And that's what I do. Naturally, before you use the oil, you subject it to the smell test, and you make sure that it doesn't smell bad, doesn't smell rancid. I want to be at least halfway up the side of this frying pan. See, Sadi, maybe you can get a little closer here. Because I have a lot of potatoes, I need to have at least that much oil. Time to slice up the potatoes. What I do is I slice them in half, and then I slice them one more time. So now we have quarters, and then I cut them about, I'm going to say, 1/8 of an inch thickness, right? It may not be perfect, but it's pretty close. The idea is to, whatever thickness you go, it can't be too thin, it can't be paper thin, it has to be at least 1/8 of an inch. But the concept is that you have to go, try to make them as uniform as possible so that they will cook uniformly. And everything gets tossed back into the water because you don't want your potatoes to get brown while you're in the process of slicing them up. So when you're done with the slicing of 1 potato, 2 potato, toss it back into the slightly salty water while you continue with the rest of the process. We're all sliced up. The next step is to poach them in that hot olive oil over there. Before I do that, though, I'm going to drain them from this water. Obviously, we don't want them. You don't want to put super wet potatoes into very hot oil because you'll have yourself a good little oil fire. I'm going to raise the temperature now on the oil to get it ready to fry. And still got a ways to go before it's hot. In the meantime, while the potatoes are draining, I'm going to crack some eggs, put them in this bowl. How many eggs? I think I'm going to start with 8 eggs, and then I'm going to see what the proportion is to the potatoes that I have. But I think that's going to be a good proportion. Some chefs don't beat it at all. When they add the potatoes is when they mix it with a big spoon. I think I get a better result by beating it a bit. And you can see, it doesn't appear to be all that many eggs, but it actually, the ratio is going to work out very well. One thing's very important is not to put any salt in the eggs at this point. If you put salt in the eggs now, they're just going to break down. I'm going to add the potatoes to the oil now to start poaching them. I recommend this tool. I don't know who makes it, but it's www.josephjoseph.com. This is just a great tool for things like this. Here we go. You can hear the sound they make when they hit the oil, but they're not bubbling up. You don't have like a huge amount of bubbles like as you would have when you were making, if you were making like say French fried potatoes. But I definitely want to regulate the temperature so I can get these potatoes to poach rather than to fry up. I don't want them to be crispy on the outside. I want them to be cooked and tender, but all the way through. I think I'm going to be able to get all of these potatoes in here. I'm going to cut it a little close, but what's life without risk? Okay, take a look here inside the pot. You see? It's not bubbling madly. It's just sort of cooking slowly, and that's what we want. I may raise the temperature a little bit. Obviously, the moment I added the potatoes, the temperature of the oil dropped dramatically. Now we're going to raise it up a little bit until it starts to cook again, and then we'll drop it down. Okay, we've got this set up here so that when the potatoes are done, we'll scoop them up and put them here, just to let them drain some of the oil off right away. But then I'm going to take the potatoes and add it to the eggs, mix them up, and let them sit for 10 or 15 minutes together with the onions that I'm also going to add there. And that's going to be the tortilla preparation that we're going to cook up. It's going to sit for about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes before we actually start to cook the tortilla. Sadi wants me to mention that I'm not being sponsored by these wonderful folks at josephjoseph.com. And I'm not, but you know, Joseph, if you want to sponsor me, you can send me another one of these. You see how it's cooking? It's bubbling tranquilly. That's what we want. It's been a minute, about 10 of them. And using my handy dandy scooper, I'm going to pick out one at random, one that's a little bit on the thicker side, like this one. I'm going to let it cool off. Sari, can you get in there? And look, you see how I just pushed it through? So this one is very close to being done. Yeah, that's good. Okay, I definitely think they're done. So I'm going to turn off the heat. I'm going to use my super duper scooper and start withdrawing them. I want to point out that they're cooked, but they're not mushy. I object strenuously to mushy potatoes in tortillas, because then what you have there is a tortilla of mashed potatoes, and I don't think that's the idea at all. So there may be other Spaniards out there who say, oh no, when you cook it they should like fall apart. Don't pay attention to those people. They don't know anything. They don't know a good thing when they see it. Now, the potatoes are nice and hot. They got to go in to the eggs. And there's one that escaped. Made a break for it. We'll get it back. Now this is also the time that you add some of the onions, as much as you want. I think that this is enough for this tortilla. And this is an important part. This is when you add a bit of salt, because this is the only salt that the eggs are going to get. Okay, as I said, I have added a bit of salt to the potatoes when they were soaking, and I can taste that salt. So it doesn't taste like saltless potatoes. It has a little bit of salt. But I'm going to add about a teaspoon of extra salt to this mix. That's more than a teaspoon, but I'm not going to put it all in there. Now we're going to give this a lovely mix. Spread all that heat from the potatoes around to the eggs. So this actually starts the cooking process right now, because the heat from the very hot potatoes makes its way into the eggs, and it starts the eggs, it sets up the eggs so that when you put it in the hot pan, which we'll get to in 10 minutes from now, it'll immediately form a crust, which is what we want. Okay, we're going to let this sit and rest, thoroughly mixed, for 10 to 12 minutes. 12 minutes have gone by. I've got a 10-inch non-stick pan, heavy duty, heavy gauge non-stick pan, over medium high heat. I'm going to add from the oil that I used to cook the potatoes, which I recovered and I put into this bowl here to cool. And when it's done cooling, I'm going to filter it back into one of those oil bottles there. But I'm going to add this here. All right. And I keep it handy because when I flip the tortilla, which we will do in a little while once it sets up, I want to add more oil to nicely brown the other side. I want to point out that I have a plate, my special tortilla flipping plate. If I ever break it, I don't know what I'll do because I bought it at Pier 1 Imports like 20 years ago, and I don't think Pier 1's around anymore. I've got it standing by, ready to go. And here's the potato, the mixture. As you can see, it's nice and thick. And I'm going to get my handy dandy big ass spatula. And look, yeah, you hear that sound? That's a beautiful sound. I think I can fit this entire mix into this pan. I think it's going to be a close thing, but I think I can make it fit. Then again, maybe not. All right, so I'm saving some for later, for something else. And look, I set it in there over medium-high heat, and now I'm letting it form that beautiful crust on the outside before I flip it for the first time. You can help it along by poking your spatula through to the bottom of the pan and letting some of the egg move around. It's been about a minute, so I'm going to drop the heat to medium, okay? Because I don't want the tortilla, to the egg part, to get too brown. I want it medium brown. I do not want it dark brown. So I just drop the heat to a little bit below medium. I'm going to let it cook for another 3 minutes. And then when the 3 minutes is up, I am going to say a prayer and I'm going to flip this tortilla over. A moment of truth. So you put the plate on, you put downward pressure on the plate, and you flip it over. Okay, now that's looking good. What I want to do now is I want to increase the temperature a little bit. I want to add a little bit of oil to the pan. Let it get hot. Just take a moment to admire this beautiful tortilla. Let it get hot for just a moment, just a few seconds. And then all you have to do is tip it back into the pan. Look, all you have to do, you see the front edge of the tortilla? Just let it come off, and there you go. All right? It doesn't have to be spectacularly beautiful. It will reform itself once it hits the pan. If you want to help it along by kicking out any stray little pieces of potato, by all means do. This is why I like this spatula, because it's flexible and it can actually get in below the tortilla. But that's just for presentation purposes. I mean, it'll still look beautiful when it's done. So I'm going to set a timer now for this medium-high heat for 1 minute. Okay, so it's been a minute at high heat. Now look, I'm going to drop the temperature down to a little bit below medium, because this is like kind of the final step, and it has to cook as much as you want it to cook all the way through. Now there's varying schools of thought as to how cooked through tortilla de patatas should be. And some parts of Spain and some cooks, you'll see that the inside is almost liquid. That's the way they like it. That's the way they serve it. That's the way they eat it. When they put it on the plate, some of it actually runs onto the plate. I don't mind that, but I would like my tortilla to hold together while still being somewhat humid and eggy in the middle. You can go all the way to the other extreme, which is basically cook solid all the way through. I guess that's appropriate for people who are not supposed to be eating raw eggs. I'm not one of those people. You can check if it's cooked with a bamboo skewer or half of a chopstick or a knife, and you can poke it through the middle and see if it comes out clean. It's pretty clean. It's pretty dry. I don't care if yeah, actually I think that is cooked enough for my taste. So when I poke it in the middle, it feels cooked to me. And I don't want it to get too hard. So off it comes. Turn off the heat. Put the plate back. This is the last flip. Hopefully I don't drop it. Ah! And there you go. It's important that you let the tortilla sit for at least 10 minutes to let it finish cooking on the inside and letting it set on the inside. If you were to cut it now, just like when you cut a lasagna that's too hot, what happens is that it all kind of falls apart. So we're going to let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll cut it open. Let's see how this looks on the inside, shall we, Sarai?
Yes, sir.
Let's get a plate. Okay, I think that looks pretty much perfect. It came out really nice, even if I say so myself. I like the ratio of egg to potato. Got a nice light brown color. Overall, it's a success. I hope you enjoyed this video. There's going to be more coming from me. Pretty soon I'm going to do another one in my series of Peruvian dishes. But for the time being, enjoy this tortilla de patatas.